Welcome to the Giant Step podcast with your host, Maurice Bernstein, as we take you on a journey into music and culture from the world of Giant Step.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Giant Steps podcast, where we take you on a journey into music and culture. I'm your host, Maurice Bernstein. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Giant Step. And this week, we're going to be hearing from Gilles Peterson, the DJ, curator, label owner, festival runner, author, and many, many other things. And we're going to be talking about what he's been up to in the year since lockdown. This episode was originally recorded as an Instagram live show on March the 5th, 2021. So please excuse any noise glitches or audio issues because, as usual, the content is well worth listening to. And if you want to hear or find out more about Giant Step, please visit us at our website at giantstep.net or follow us on Instagram and get in touch with us. So please enjoy our conversation with Gilles Peterson. There we go.
Okay.
Yeah, brilliant.
All right, let's do it. Okay. Sorry about that. I missed that. Do it again. Come on. Are you picking me up?
Yeah, I was picking you up. So I was saying thank you for letting us indulge over the last week on the Giant Step socials with sort of like the old flyers, posters, recordings, and some videos. I know you were probably cringing while we were doing it, but sometimes I think, it's important to, for you to take a bow because you've done incredible stuff over the last, 30 plus years. So, I
30, 40.
30 plus, I said 30 plus. We'll get into that.
The thing is, American DJs always celebrate their birthday, don't they? I remember every time I come to America, it was like any excuse to get people out. The DJ, if it's your birthday, even if it's your wife's birthday, you'd put a party on and basically, extra 20 people would turn up. And I always thought, it's a bit naff. But actually, I'm at the stage in my life now where I'm going to celebrate like 40 years of DJing.
Absolutely, and then also, on a personal level, just over lockdown, the show on Radio 6, and I've told you this personally, but I just want to say it on air, especially at the beginning, it kind of really helped me, and I'm sure thousands of other people, really get through it, just knowing that, the world had pretty much gone to shit, but every Saturday you were still going in and making the show. And then also with Worldwide FM. So thank you for that. I mean, it really was a big boost for everybody. Much appreciated.
Well, I'm glad I had I'm glad I had a purpose. I think the days that I had off, I didn't know what to do. And I suddenly thought, God, thank God, the Sundays, especially when there was no football on, there was that period when there was nothing going on at all.
Yeah.
It was like, oh my, yeah.
Oh no, I mean, Saturdays
hardcore.
without football, it was just like, if you had gone as well, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't know what to do with myself. So it was brilliant. And, there was that one time where you everyone was going through it, but you called me up and you said, how are you doing? And I'm like, well, how are you doing? And then you played a record for me and my family. And it was just really very thoughtful and kind, because everyone was going through it. So thank you for that. So, I mean, you've been very, very busy over lockdown. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about what you've been doing. I mean, Worldwide FM, you've literally tripled your numbers, which is incredible. You've got the book coming out, so to talk, you're always doing a lot of stuff, but just talk about some of the stuff that you've been doing over the last year.
Okay, yeah. Well, the mad thing actually that happened today was that the festival. I do 3 festivals. I do a festival in France, in Sète, which is like near Montpellier, very nice sort of fishing village, small town. I've been doing that for 15 years, and that unfortunately isn't happening this year because the French authorities have kind of become quite a bit stricter actually than the UK. They've been very sort of they've put the rules down so far anyway that no festivals over 5,000 people are going to be allowed, and that they've got to be sit down only and social distance. So that kind of cuts out the festival in France. And then I do a weekend in Italy, which hopefully will happen, which is in September.
Where in Italy is that?
It's in Catania. It's an amazing little spot outside of the town in La Cati Generale, but we also do events around the town and off the volcano, Mount Etna. There's some amazing sort of vineyards and farms and stuff there. So that's been really lovely for the last couple of years. Hopefully that will happen. That's quite small with food as well. So we work with a lot of chefs.
Oh, nice.
And we bring over Ed Wilson from Brawn, who comes and brings his team. So, you know, and they do a kind of culinary exchange. So it's like a musical exchange, cultural thing. It's really been a lot of fun doing that. And then the other festival that I do is the We Out Here Festival, which started in 2019, and we had an amazing first festival just outside London near Cambridge. Very much a time to celebrate, you know, this incredible renaissance, I suppose, of jazz and electronic music coming together. It's the best time, you know, I've ever had, really, in what I do.
Musically.
It's all coming together. Musically, culturally, you know,
joining the dots,
conversation,
as you say, right?
Joy, yeah, you know, and it's just really encouraging. You know, it's an encouraging time, and there's so much sort of to celebrate musically. And I think, in a way, you know, music has become more important over the last year, and the significance of community and all of those things. So, yeah, so I did We Out Here a couple of years ago. The headline was well, on the Sunday was Gary Bartz, Saul Williams, who else was there? Dwight Tribble. That was at the closer. They did Celestial Blues, I've Known Rivers, wow. And it was probably the greatest moment of my like curator life. Basically, it'd been raining for a couple of days, and yes, it was like, you know, the weather had got good and everyone had a brilliant time, and so that was a beautiful ending. And so last year was meant to be the sort of the second one, but obviously that got cancelled because of the COVID. But this year, because Boris, our good friend Boris, well, he is right now. When he announced that
Boris Johnson, for those who don't know who Boris is, yes,
yeah, you know, fucking it up. But anyway, he
don't get me started.
He's given us some
America.
good news. But anyway, if it does come through like he's promising, June the 21st is going to be back to normal, and so that gives us 2 months to get our festival going. So he's given the green light to all the festivals, pretty much. So we put tickets on sale last week and we sold out today.
That's amazing.
That's how much.
That's incredible.
Yeah. I mean,
congratulations.
Every festival in England is selling out, by the way.
People are just, you know, they people are going crazy. I mean, you know, they just can't.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm even thinking of coming over for it. It's like, you know, it's because we're not going to have anything here for a while.
Right.
And who do you have on the bill? Who do you have on the bill?
Well, we got some good ones. We got some good ones. You know, it's pretty much everyone that was playing last year. Obviously, we're very lucky with, you know, a whole heap of great British jazz acts, from the Sons of Kemet to Nubia Garcia to some up and coming new groups, Alpha Mist, all of that stuff. Some really good deep people at Floating Points, you know. But what's good about it as well is that it kind of goes into those kind of underground sort of drum and bass. But, you know, we got people like Fabio and Groove Rider playing, and Randall.
Oh wow!
And then we got the Garage Lots, and Loafer. So all those like really important sub scenes that kind of make sense. I don't really want to go to a jazz festival. You know, I love the jazz. I love hearing comments coming and seeing all that stuff. That's amazing. But I'm about connecting the dots between, you know, club culture and live music. So that's what I've always really done, in a way. And I think from the days of Dingwalls and the Wag Club and everything that I've done, the Jazz Bops, all the festivals, for me, it's always been about this marriage between music, musicians, and DJs, and the audience and the community that comes with it. And it's funny,
and generations as well, because you've managed to join the dots through generations, bringing back a lot of those artists who people didn't know about, not only bringing them to a new generation, but bringing a new, and vice versa, resurrecting careers in many ways.
Yeah, well, I'm a fan, you know that. I mean, I'm, what I've done all year, I've just been buying records, right? That's what I've been doing. I haven't stopped really. And that's what I get my biggest pleasure from still, and when I can find, I don't know, if I can knock on Kalya's door in Chicago and or have a cup of tea with Larry Heard, and they're happy to see me, I'm happy to see them, and then Terry gives me an acetate of a Charles Stepney album that was actually intended to come out but never really came out in that form. Those are the things that kind of give me pleasure, because it's culture and it's joining the dots, and it's really celebrating those people that gave us such a great platform, really. And in a way, back to the festivals and where it's at now, I think one of the reasons it's really great is because the new generation of musicians, the band, never had it. So when we were doing acid jazz, and when the Jazz Warriors and the Courtney Pines and the Steve Williamsons and the Steve Colemans and all that, we were trying to make those connections, Branford Marsalis and all of that. We were still in different corners. We were trying to make it work, but it wasn't fluid, because it needed them to understand us and us to understand them, and for there not to be any kind of snobbiness about it. And I think the new generation, they've basically, the last 10 years, they've learned the DIY aspects of putting on parties, of getting DJs, learning the craft of DJing, seeing it as something that is an art form, just like playing the saxophone is.
Yeah.
So,
and they grew up on it as well. I mean, they were probably listening to that music before many of them got into the jazz that they then went on to play. It's their contemporary music.
Yeah. So it's in their DNA, and somehow now, as a result, the music coming out of that is actually really interesting for the first time in a while. Up until now, it's been about how to prove yourself as a player if you're a jazz musician, and now they've all done that because there's enough of a network here where those players can play daily and jam daily and create daily. So they're good, they're really good. And then within that, there's the whole thing about about do it yourself, and about sort of putting it on and creating your zine and your event and your show on your online radio station,
and being able to put music out easily. Whereas when back when we were starting out, it was much harder. You needed help to do the heavy lifting with distribution and manufacturing and even recording. Going into a studio and recording, not everybody could do that. Whereas now, you can go like song to global like that with very little money.
Yeah. So it's difficult to sign them now if you're running a record label. That's the flip of that.
Talk a little bit about the record label, because you have Brownswood Records. I mean, you've been in the record business for many years. You had there was acid jazz, there was Talking Loud, and for the last 15 years it's been Brownswood. Has it been?
Yeah, pretty much that. Yeah, I started off in the 80s doing compilations, which was basically
Freedom Principle,
mixtape.
Yeah.
And lots of stuff with Jazz Juice, Blue Note, blah blah blah. Did loads of that, and then started up first record label I did was actually a label called BGP.
Right.
With a DJ called Baz for Jazz.
Yeah.
And it was Baz and Gilles Peterson. So that was BGP. And that was basically the first time I went to America, actually, because it was a record label called Ace Records, who own, they buy up old labels.
Yeah. They had all the catalogue. Yeah.
They have the catalogues, and they bought up Prestige and Fantasy catalogue. And the guy who ran Ace in the UK, he knew about me because I had these jazz compilations. And I was only like 19 or 20, and I was obviously opening up the door of this old music to a new young public of clubs, of just clubbers. And so he thought, let's get this kid in and see what he can do. And he sent me to San Francisco. He sent me to Berkeley. I've never been to America before. And
what year was this?
And yeah, he said this was, wow. I mean, it's before Acid House, right? So we're talking about
86. 85?
87, 88, yeah, around that time. And so I was really young. And I remember my mate, I used to play residency in a place called the Belvedere in Richmond. And
somebody just put that up on the chat, the Belvedere in Richmond. Yeah.
And so Richmond isn't that far from Heathrow. And one of the guys who came to the club said he worked in the actual in the tower at Heathrow. At Heathrow, and he said, and I said, I'm going to America like tomorrow or something. He goes, really? What flight are you on? Blah, blah. And then the next got my plane to San Francisco, and it was really great. I had a really big seat, and they gave me really nice food, and I was like, oh, this is all right. I love traveling and stuff, and I hadn't realized that he'd upgraded me. So my first trip to America was like really
in first
luxurious.
Class, yeah. And on the way back,
ever since
just to the back of the plane.
Turn left. I was definitely back of the plane on the way back,
right.
yeah. But it was like he gave me quite a happy lesson, a happy moment that day. But yeah, I went over to San Francisco, and I spent a week in the just their archives, basically going through like Riverside records, Bobby Timmons albums, discovering Latin jazz quintet albums that had never come out, just like in my element, because Milestone was also a really great label, had all that stuff by like Laura Purim and the Brazilian stuff, and there's so much stuff. So I basically was just dropped into a kind of amazing record
treasure
shop.
Treasure
trove, yeah. And so that was that. So I went back, did loads of comps, and then I wanted to sort of start putting out music of bands that were actually, because the compilations was more like it was kind of like learning, and then because there was a great scene of bands coming through, this is the precursors to the Brand New Heavies and to the Jamiroquais, the beginnings of an acid jazz movement. I wanted to start putting records out, and so. Yeah, that's when I set up Acid Jazz and did that, and then that was great. But it was at the back of my flat. Every penny that was spent on all those records was by DJing 6 or 7 nights a week. I didn't stop. I DJed like the only day I had off was probably Tuesday. And so all that money would go back into the record label. That's how it was. Everybody had jobs. Nobody could like do this for a living.
Right. But did you even think when you started putting out those that you could actually make a living out of it?
Not really. To be honest with you, I didn't realize I was going to actually. I was just bluffing it, really. As we all were,
We all were.
God,
we all were.
We're avoiding getting a real job.
Exactly. I had no idea what I was doing. I still don't, but
Yeah. No, it's been weird. I mean, in a way, that's one of the lovely sort of charms of what it was about. We didn't quite realize what it was that we were doing. It was all about community, and what I knew at the time is I knew that if I wanted this to grow, I needed to go and work with a bigger label, and I needed to work internationally, because I knew that doing it on my own, none of us were really prepared to be mentored. Actually, we were so pig-headed and sort of determined that we knew what was going on.
And left field as well, because the directions that you were going in, you were plowing new furrows. I mean, it just, nobody would have recommended for you to do any of that stuff. Like, I want to work with this type of music, these type of artists. They'd be like, forget it.
Yeah, no, in retrospect, there was no comparison to it, but there was a movement, there were clubs. I was the guy who played in the back room, right? So, I was playing all those clubs with people like Pete Tong and Paul Oakenfold.
They were in the main room. Yeah.
They were in the main room, and every now and again I'd play in there, but really I was having much more fun at the back. And then we all ended up going to Ibiza together. Nicky Holloway was a really important person here in the UK, because he was the guy who put on a lot of events and sort of quite offbeat stuff, which was quite enjoyable. He kind of connected fashion and the kind of soul scene together in the West. And then he organized these trips to Ibiza, which is when, obviously everyone took MDMA or ecstasy, and suddenly, from smoking to dropping pills. And funny enough, I didn't do any of that. I was just quite happy in my little in the back, just sort of watching it and listening to Miles Davis and bossa novas and, jazzy kind of rare grooves. And so when that happened, that was a real massive split in the movement, because it was kind of like if you went and took the drugs, then you basically entered the door, which was acid house.
Right.
And that was basically where the scene went from being a kind of one scene to being like several scenes, which is when I then kind of wanted to have the energy of that acid house, because it was exciting.
Yeah.
But drugs. So we were all about the natural high, and we called what we were doing, acid jazz. And so that's really how acid jazz came along, really. Eventually, everyone found themselves in the same clubs, by the way.
Yeah.
It took about a year. But as Rob said to me, my MC, Rob said to me, my MC says, if you'd taken ecstasy with the others in 1986 or something, it would have been very interesting to see the direction that I would have taken, in terms of, as a DJ, because I think it kind of was quite an important turning point at that time.
It was a huge turning point. I mean, I remember I moved to the States just before the Summer of Love, and, from Manchester, going to the Hacienda pre-Acid House, and then coming back to England when the whole MDMA scene had exploded, and seeing the change. And seeing the change of mood in people, like from being scared you were going to get beaten up by someone to somebody coming up to you and like hugging you, it was just a huge shift. It was a huge watershed, and getting more people into that type of music who were not going to dance clubs back then.
Exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, football changed, culture changed. You'd go to games and they were on E from the night before, and suddenly it was a much less aggressive atmosphere. Yeah. And you'd go to places like Bournemouth and certain clubs on the South Coast, because I don't know why, but down there they were sort of quite pilled up and happy, So it changed everything. So yeah, I have to say, I've just noticed that Goldie's on, and I'm so pleased. I mean, he's a legend,
total legend, and the United fan, right?
Is he a United fan? I think that.
I've seen Goldie at some games.
He's not a football guy. He's not.
Goldie, are you a United supporter?
He's dropped out.
He's gone. So, and now you've got Brownswood Records. What do you have coming out on Brownswood that you're excited about?
Well, we've been busy. We've been very busy this last year, luckily.
Yes, he's a Red.
Oh, is he? Oh,
yeah, no. Yeah, I told you. I've seen him at games.
Oh, really? Okay, I'm sorry, Goldie. So basically, before lockdown, I did something. Talking of legends, before lockdown, one of my loveliest friends is Bluey from Incognito, and story actually with me goes back to the days I had a pirate radio station in my back garden. As a kid, I was 16, and my mum and dad let me go and sort of start building weird transmitters in the back garden shed, and I phoned up, or I wrote to all my favourite bands at the time. All British funk bands, jazz funk bands, and to see if they'd come and be interviewed by me. Of course, none of them did, because I was this sort of,
Because you were like some,
I was just in a dream world, and I was broadcasting to just the top of my street. But Bluey answered anyway, and he lived in Tottenham. I lived in Sutton, and he came all the way, and I was only 17, I think, at the time. And Brit funk is a kind of British movement that was around the time of punk music. So when punk was coming between 76 and 81, that kind of thing, at that time, there was a parallel underground scene happening in the UK, which is not really written about, which was based out of a load of British bands that wanted to be like American funk bands. So just like punk musicians were learning to play the bass and learning to play, there was this kind of DIY aesthetic about Brit funk. And that was what was good about it. And out of that came groups like Freeze, Light of the World, High Tension, Incognito. Mm-hmm. So when Tyler goes, this is my influence, or I owe a lot to Brit funk, I was like, Bluey. In all those groups, Bluey was a founder member of Freeze, who gave us Southern Freeze. He was a founder member of Incognito, Light of the World. He was part of Central Line, and he's gone on to produce and continue maintaining his, hisness ever since. So I was like, mate, let's make a record. But the problem is, when I didn't want it to be a clean and shiny record. I wanted it to be DIY
and sound like the original. Yeah.
Sort of. So what I was doing in the studio, saying to the guy, no, stop now, because if you're talking to musicians, they just want to sound better and better. It's natural, isn't it? You want to be good. And I was saying, I don't want you to be good. I want you to be like 4.5 out of 10.
Right.
And so they were playing at 8 out of 10 level. There'd be a mistake. I said, that's what I want. I was looking for mistakes, right?
Do that again.
So we made the record. This is the record. It's just arrived, and that's me. That's me when I was like 20 there, and this is Bluey when he was about. Oh no, hang on, that's us on the Pirates. That's the Pirates thing. That's Bluey there. Anyway, we made a record, and it's called Strata.
Oh, nice.
And it's just coming out. It's coming out in 2 weeks' time. So
fantastic. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
I mean, I remember, like I was like 15 or something, watching Top of the Pops and seeing Freeze on Top of the Pops, and it was so different to all the other music that was around, and they were using congas, guitars, and I was like, what the hell is that? And I just became obsessed by them. And then just obviously dived into the whole, that jazz funk scene, and then you had Level 42 come out and stuff. But it was the same as punk in a way, that it was a radical shift, and it was very influenced by what was happening in America, just as punk was, So that's brilliant. We don't have a huge amount of time. I want to hear about your book, because that is really exciting. Yeah. So tell us about your book.
Well, okay. So basically, over lockdown, it's kind of a book, right? So it's basically over lockdown, the first lockdown, as you were saying at the beginning, I presented 80 radio shows over that period. So I was on the radio every day. And every day on Worldwide FM, and then on Saturdays I was asked to do a 4-hour show on the BBC, because
you extended a
lot of the presenters couldn't come in. They were, it was so you had to be a key worker to go into town, and by being the BBC,
you were actually going to work.
I was going to work. Yeah. It was a mad time, and literally, it was like a ghost building. You go in the BBC, there's no one around. And my producer and me, and he was allowed to come in my studio with me. Other shows, they weren't allowing the producers in. But because I don't mix, I don't do radio in the traditional way, where you sit behind a desk and you have someone do everything for you and write everything for you. I go into the studio with like 80 tracks, and I play like I'm doing a club set. So I stand up, I mix the music live, and so he has to be in the room with me to put out things like the news and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, the fact was, we were both doing it. He was wearing his mask, and I was basically show. And obviously there was a bigger audience than normal, but it was even more important at that time. And there was no football. And it was there was no football, exactly. So it was great. And for me, it was really interesting, because it was kind of like, it came at a time when I've sort of got 30 years behind me, in a way, of history in radio. And in a way, I can kind of, I don't know, I've got more context and in everything. And by being on the BBC daytime, there's a lot of people who don't know about all the stuff we're talking about, regular people, because it's still outside of music. So anyway, the fact of the matter was, I was playing at the BBC every Saturday, and the audience was big, and loads of people were dying. Loads of musicians were dying everywhere. So one day it was Manu Dibango, the next day it was Anaja and Gums, the next day it was McCoy Tyner,
Mongo Santa Maria,
every day. So my show became a kind of obituary. It became a little bit of a sort of celebration in a quiet way. The tone had to be right. And so it was a very magical time, actually, in a weird way, to be a broadcaster of music, where you could really see how music could have impact and how it could help. And so it was a great sort of platform at that time for me, and it was full on, and lots of stuff was happening, of course, which led to Black Lives Matter and all of what was going on around that. So the book, and continues to go on. So the book really is a kind of, it's a sort of diary of that time for me. And it basically uses the radio shows and the playlists as a kind of, that's the thread. And then the whole of what was going on, the narrative of COVID, of the world, and obviously the social change that was going on. So yeah, the book is 600 pages.
Wow.
It's massive, right? And
Wow.
it's going to today. Yeah. So
when's it coming out? How can people buy it? And
yeah,
is it like a coffee table book?
We're going to have stuff. Yeah, it's a kind of, you know what? It's a folly. It's a folly. It's some people are going to go, oh my God, this is deep. Other people are going to go, mate, you're taking a piss. It's like, why would you do this? So it's not, hello, my name is, and I was born here. It's very much based on 2020 and 80 radio shows. And yeah, a year that we'll never, ever forget. Obviously, a year that's changing, the planet, culture, people, everything. So I wanted to kind of just get it down and, celebrate the music and the people and the culture. So throughout the book, there's also a kind of photo essay by Dobie. So Dobie was a really important part of early hip hop.
Dobie, the producer. Dobie, the producer.
Soul.
Yeah, of course.
Dobie, the producer.
Yeah.
London Posse, all that, and he's an amazing photographer. So he basically, you should check out Dobie Photo if anybody's keen to check him out. He's got amazing talent, and he's a special person. He's the ghost dog of East London, basically. Denzel Washington. He's that kind of figure. He goes on his own, and he's just an amazing beat maker, thinker. And anyway, his photography is in the book. There's the guy who's actually designed the book is a guy called Hugh Miller, who's brilliant as well. It's really worth following. And I got Paul Bradshaw to edit the book, who was the guy, of course,
from Straight No Chaser,
who had Straight No Chaser for years. So yeah, I'm very excited about that. I have to say. I hope does it come across? I'm just pleased it's going.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, you always get excited, Giles. You're a very excited person, and I'm definitely going to get those. That very excited about that. So I'm looking forward to that. So
no, it's not. Someone just said, who was the ghostwriter? It's not a ghostwriter, by the way. I've just read something.
No, ghost dog.
I wrote it. Ghost dog.
The juxtaposition with lockdown is that you spent so much of your life pre-lockdown just traveling all the time. Constantly traveling, always on the road, doing gigs, obviously doing the radio and records and all that, but still traveling. And for the last year, you've done no DJ gigs, as far as I know, and no real. How's that been for you? I mean, that's like a interesting pause in your life in a way. Yeah.
Well, I've done some virtual gigs, which are horrible. That's what I say. I'm not going to do any more, right? I've done a couple of these things, and they're more fun because I'm speaking to one person.
I hope you're not going to say that was horrible too.
But no, I did a DJ gig last week for Beatport. They're lovely, and it was for the GTA because I did the Worldwide FM on GTA. It was actually quite a lot of fun doing that last year. I did a show last week for Beatport. They just said, "Oh, can you do a mix?" And so I said, "Oh yeah, come on." And I was kind of in denial. I didn't prepare anything, and I just literally came in and sort of did it, and it was all right, and it went out last week. But mate, getting yourself in the zone, it's a bit like being a footballer,
right?
And suddenly not
playing
having
with in front of no crowd.
Well, no, but no pre-season training. More to the point, so you're it's like you've been thrown into an FA Cup final, and you got to play the full 90 minutes plus injury time and extra time and penalties, and you haven't played for months. And I think DJing's a bit like that because it's like, you're just always in that thing. And so being in front of a mixer with all these cameras was kind of a bit weird, but you get used to it. But no, I'm very much looking forward to going back to DJing. But I have to tell you, Maurice, I needed a break. After all those years. So it did come at a good time for me. The weird thing for me at the moment, though, is that I go to bed really early now, right? So it's kind of like I go to bed at like
that's why we had to move
even earlier.
Just so people know, that's why we had to move this talk because originally it was going to be at 5 p.m. my time, 10 p.m. But that's past your bedtime now. So
It's past my bedtime, mate. You know, because I get up so early. I'm up at like 5:30. The other person who's up as early as me is actually Goldie. Goldie's up early with his yoga, but
Right.
I'm up early, guys. So basically, I've been I've been up already more than 12 hours today, Maurice, for this.
Yeah. Yeah, preparing for this.
But no, it's been a good time to be. It's been a good time to be. Well, you know, people aren't used to seeing me every day in my family, and I think it's freaked them out a little bit. You know.
No, but I think you know, obviously there's been a lot of hardships and deaths and problems, but you know, for me the positive side is it's definitely given us the ability to reflect a little bit about just what we're doing in our lives, instead of just being on that sort of like that Ferris, you know, that hamster wheel the whole time, and we're just, before we know it, like we're, you know, because we're getting on a little bit as well. So, you know,
the funny thing about this as well, on getting on, the getting on thing, what's weird as well is that when I was DJing a year, you know, I'd be out there literally. I mean, even like before lockdown, I was doing things like going to Graz in Austria on a Friday night, DJing. This is about 2 hours drive from Vienna. I'd be DJing from 1 till 3 in the morning. I'd be driving back to Vienna for like 4. By half four, I'd be arriving in Vienna in a hotel for 2 hours. Then I'd get up, no sleep, get on a plane at 8, go back to London for like, get to London about 10:30, 11. And then I'd hang around and do my radio show. That was normal for me, you know, at the age that I was in. So, but here's the funny thing, right? So I was living that life for like 30, 40 years, like 3-4 nights a week DJing, traveling, all that sort of stuff. And I do 1 year off where I have sleep every night, and you know, I'm eating well, I've got time to exercise and do all my stuff. I have aged so much. It's like, you know, I really feel like I've got older.
No, you haven't.
I've done
You still
so
look
little.
You still look 16. I mean, you've got
Well,
the eternal look of youth in you, and you know, and I think in general in our scene, I think it's something about the music, but everybody pretty much looks great. I mean, you know, like a lot of the DJs who are on here at the moment, you know, everyone, you know, it's, so I think it's the music that and the energy that gives us, really sort of gives us life and vitality. Talking about that, you know, we're celebrating, obviously Giant Step celebrating its 30th anniversary, and you know, you were a big inspiration on Jonathan and I starting Giant Step. I mean, that was the thing that Jonathan and I bonded on, that he knew about Dingwalls as much as I did too. You know, we've done so much stuff together over the years. I wanted to see if you had any highlights that you wanted to talk about.
Well, you know, yeah, I mean, you know, honestly, first times I'd go to New York and I'd hang out with you guys and you'd take me about everywhere. You know, I mean, that first Jamiroquai show, you know,
which you DJ'd at. Yeah.
I DJ'd that, and he borrowed my Adidas like vintage tracksuit top that I never got back.
He never got back.
Way.
All right, Jay, if you're listening,
yeah,
top back.
I want it back. That's a rare piece, man. But yeah, you know, the brand new Heavies versus Galliano night
at the Village Gate, which was actually, that was at the Village Gate, and that was your New York debut DJing. And I want to just talk a little bit about the fact that I was asking you to DJ from the day we opened the club, and you were always refusing to do it. And you would come and you would be in New York because you were there doing Talking Loud business. And you go, I can't DJ. I'm not DJing. Why wouldn't you DJ? You want to tell
really
people
weird, you know? Well, this is the Francois Kevorkian thing, because Francois always said to me, can you play a body and soul? Mm-hmm. And, you know, obviously, whenever I'd come to New York, I'd always sort of do my thing. And I always made sure I was there on a Tuesday night for Sound Factory bar for Louis.
Well, Wednesday for Sound Factory, yeah.
Wednesday for Sound Factory bar.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tuesday for Francois at Cielo later. But yeah, I'd be there for that. And then I'd always make sure I was there for the Sunday to do Body and
Yeah.
Soul, because it was like, you know, obviously very important part of being in New York, right? You go clubbing and you'd listen to all these amazing DJs. And I was just sort of like, there's no way I can play in the same DJ box as these guys. I mean, they were so sort of monstrously, they were beyond for me. And so Francois always said to me, man, you know, I'm not going to let any foreign DJ play until you've played at my club, right? So I never did it. I never played, and I don't think any English DJs ever played at Body and Soul, because I had never. He always said that you'll have to play before I invite any other English players. I don't know if that's true. I like to think it is.
But you also, I think you felt that you didn't think people would appreciate the music that you were playing, your style. You were quite nervous that you wouldn't get a, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, there's so many
I've
times
always been nervous though.
You finished a set and I've gone, Giles, that was amazing. You're like, oh shit, I fucked up. Oh, really,
Yeah.
really? You're not just saying that? It's like, no, it was great, you know.
Yeah. I think it took a while for me to appreciate that, you know, I was able to offer something which was unique in the way I approached the art of DJing. But I think for many years, I just watched these guys, and, you know, it's typical, isn't it? It's like, you know, if you're a jazz musician playing in the Village Gate, if you're British, it's going to be a major deal.
Yeah.
So being invited by Louis or by any of those guys to go and then was always quite, it took a while for me to kind of realize that, you know, I had something. And yeah, so in a way that's kind of, yeah, but yeah, I was daunted by New York.
Yeah.
And then something happened, and I loved it, and the audience response was very different to anywhere else in the world, and it was amazing, you know. And if you played in these clubs and there was the dancers, obviously my other memories, which I'll never forget, you know, for the rest of my days, is every year that we'd have in Miami for the Winter Music Conference at a time when, you know, everything was coming
the halcyon
together.
days, as they say, right? They were the
Yeah,
halcyon
but
days.
it was magic, man. And, you know, and we'd put on these events, and you'd see the Gotham Project, or you'd see Represent. You'd go and listen to King Britt and Josh Wink, have all the
we used to King's on the chat, but the back room in the room, was it called the Room? Every year we would be there for King's set, and we loved it, you know, like. But
King and Josh,
I mean,
King and Josh.
Yeah, Josh was in the main room. But I was looking at a flyer we actually posted it for one of the Sunset Soirees that we did with Maxi and Kimco. And the lineup was incredible. It was you, Bob Sinclair, Ron Trent, Norman Jay, Pete Heller, Julius Papp. I mean, like, talk about sort of like all these different, you know, styles of dance music, but working so well. And everybody, and DJ Yellow as well was on it. You know, just it was like a coming together of all these different DJs and styles.
Yeah, it was a very magical time. And you know, there was a golden era. There's when, mate, it was ridiculous. And, you know, if you just spent the winter in England, everyone, the industry would go, you know. So it wasn't just an industry, it was like the club, the dancers, the clubbers. So you'd meet everyone. It was like all these little micro scenes would meet up in this kind of lovely sort of Florida, Miami. It was just weird, you know. And so yeah, I felt
it was the same for New Yorkers as well, because it was the first sunshine we'd seen in months. And yeah, I mean, it was just, it was magical. I don't know if I could still do that, but because, you know, it'd be 5 nights of, you know, going out every single night, all day. But it was magical. The Raleigh, the Delano.
I remember the Nuyorican Soul launch party in Miami, where they had the party and they had the live band, and Louis asked me to introduce the band, and I was really scared about that because we'd been up all night.
Yes.
Been to
I think we came straight from a club to go there.
Yeah,
I remember,
I was getting super angled out before I went on stage. I think I did the worst ever presentation of any gig ever.
That was great. That was actually 98, because it was the year, or 99. It was a couple of years after the actual Nuyorican launch party at the Shore Club, where it was in this sort of outdoor amphitheater style club.
Yeah. Down, quite a bit further down,
all the way down. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Danny Tenaglia all night long. Of course, you can't miss that.
All day long.
Look at your face.
And while we're reminiscing, I think we also, we were just talking about Nuyorican Soul. I mean, that is probably you're correct. It was at OPM. It was the 10th anniversary. Whoever just put that up there. Correct. I think we really need to just talk a little bit about that project, because it was you who really, you inspired that project to come together. Before, I got involved, you had already sort of to talk a little bit about how you got that to happen.
Okay, so I was doing a club on a Monday night with James Lavelle called That's How It Is.
Yeah.
So there'd been a bit of a transition, it's a few years after Acid House, and things are changing a little bit. I'd done a lot of years at Dingwalls, which was a really important early club for me. And so I started doing a Monday night. The music was really exciting. There's the birth of the beginnings of trip hop and Massive Attack and Portishead and DJ Shadow. And, obviously we were all house heads and we all loved sort of dance music. And suddenly this record arrived called The Nervous Track. And it was a record that came out, and it was really brilliant. It was different. And it was a little bit too different, I think, for the sort of regular house heads to play it. But it was made for Bar Rumba. It was just the tune that would just, it just joined and ticked all the boxes. So I got in touch with Louis and Kenny, and I was like, mate, is there any more of this sort of stuff? And then we started having a chat and developing the idea, realizing that there was something to be done which could kind of really make a kind of experimental record for Kenny and Louis. Not a Masters at Work record, but a record where they went down their different alleyways. Because of course, Kenny and his hip hop, the connections with Jazzy Jeff, and of course the Latin and Hector Lavoe being Louis' uncle and all that stuff. And I was like, oh my God, these guys have got it all. So it was really a case of just let's make an album. And it took a while for us to kind of really, for me actually, to kind of convince them. And, they were so big. They were. They were like, who's the biggest DJ in the world today? They were like that plus.
And when it came to remix production, they were doing everybody. Madonna, they were the guys. They were the go-to guys.
Yeah. And in those days, they used to get paid, man. So, but you'd pay Masters at Work, I don't know, £25,000 or whatever, which was a lot of money then
to do a remix,
to do mixes. But you'd get your money back, and they deliver you 4 or 6 cuts, dubs, weird stuff, so they really gave you your money's worth. But they were on fire, and they were at the point where they needed to maybe be tested a bit, and I think that we found ourselves at a good place at the right time. And they were also very, very, the other thing about them too was that they were very curious, as in Britt, who's here as well today, and the Philly scene, and there was a few people within the American kind of dance music community that were really, really watching and connecting and collaborating with the Britishness. So that's how the 4 heroes of this world connected with King Britt. That's why Ronnie and Louis and Kenny, they ended up swap remixes. Louis was fascinated by drum and bass. Louis and Kenny would come to Dingwalls to check out the jazz dancers. They were like, this is out of this world. This is what the hell is going on here? They were really into it. So, we were all into each other, really. So it was just a case of, how can I get those guys to make an amazing record? So I told them to do a few cover versions. I told them to do Black Gold of the Sun. I can't remember what.
And had they heard Black Gold of the Sun before you?
I think Kenny might have done, because Kenny's got everything, right?
Right.
Kenny is deep. When it comes to collecting, there's people who collect records, a bit of stuff. Kenny's on it hard.
He's a collector.
He's so on it. But yeah, so really, I mean, the magic really came, and this is when you got involved, because I think we needed, the thing was, Nuyorican Soul, they were so big, you couldn't pay for the whole thing on your own. I needed to get partners, and we got Avex in Japan to throw some money in to make it count, and obviously you had the relationship with him, I had the relationship with you. It made total sense for us to team up, and then you hooked him up with Tommy Lipuma, who was the president. Next thing you know, George Benson's going to the studio.
Next thing, we got George Benson involved.
Yeah.
And it was interesting back then because we were all at separate. Talking Loud was an imprint of Polygram, which was a major, and Giant Step was an imprint of GRP, which was a part of MCA, which was a major. But they were totally separate companies. So it was kind of you and me brought these two big companies together to work together because they were big competitors. But we managed to really pool a lot of the resources to get that record done, because otherwise the product that came out, the quality from the packaging, to the, just everything about the production, it needed real, because again, back then you had to spend money to produce good records. So I'd say kudos to our teams, our internal, for putting that together, because it was very hard back then.
Yeah, I know. It was so hardcore, but it worked. And what a record. And guess what? Next year's the 25th anniversary of Nuyorican Soul, right?
Oh my God.
See what we can.
Yes, it is.
What we can work out for 2023.
And
I hope they can do some shows.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that it's a timeless record, and again, back then, mixing all those genres wasn't heard of, because everyone just would release records in a lane, and that had multiple lanes. And again, I'd say a precursor for so many other albums that came out, and probably a way that got so many people into these different artists as well. They'd probably never heard of. Hilton Ruiz or Lisa Fisher, et cetera, or even Roy Ayers. Some people might not have heard of him, but it was just bringing all those people together. So it was a pretty incredible thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I mean, what can I say? La India, Dave Valentin was on there. Eddie Palmieri is on this record.
Palmieri, yeah.
Man, so we'll always look back on that one. The other record, I mean, that certainly for me is a significant moment in my work as an A&R, sort of whatever, you want to call, what we did. It was beautiful working with someone like Tommy Lipuma as well, to have that kind of class and elegance and support. Is really important, and that he helped make it happen. It was very difficult.
Class act. Yeah,
class act. It's difficult. It's difficult these days to kind of imagine majors kind of collaborating like that. I mean, even for me at the time, I did the first Roots EP, and I tried to sign them, before they signed to Geffen with Wendy, and they because I'd come all the way to New York. They felt for me. They were like, man, these kids come to try and sign us. They were this little group from Philly. I mean, a big group, but they hadn't yet signed the big deal.
Right.
And so we managed to work out a way in which they moved to London, and they spent a year kind of learning their European kind of lessons and chops and traveling and basically living in my office.
Yeah.
And allowed us to put out the first EP from the ground up.
And they were more popular in England and Europe than they were in the States back then, because they weren't really known outside of Philadelphia.
Man, look, all these groups had to come to the UK, I think, whether you're even groups like Outkast and even people like Erica, Jill Scott, all these people, Mos Def, or Madlib, all of these people, right? Because I think there was a sort of more a fluid media here. It was less
no doubt.
segregated.
I mean, having your radio show, which is, again, it's on national, even when you're on Radio 1, it's national radio. So people nationally could hear it, whereas in America there isn't that same sort of like national thing. Giles, we're almost running out of time, and they cut us off like on the hour. So is there anything else that you want to, before we end? This has been brilliant. I mean, we could go on for hours, but they won't let us. Is there anything else you want to say before we go?
I just want to say I'm looking at names. It's a bit off-putting when you're doing this, because you can see all the names coming up. I'm seeing Ursula Rucka, I'm seeing Benji B, I'm seeing a bunch of people who've joined.
Jonathan
King, shout out to King. Lots of people. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Mate, Maurice, I've had the best life. I still adore what I do. I can't wait to get out in the clubs. Can't wait to hug and to enjoy that moment where we just hear the bass and we're there, we're dressed up and we feel good, and the sun's shining, the sun's coming up, the sun's going down. We've been a bit naughty, this, that, or the other. I can't wait for that time to come back. And I've had so many good times with you.
It will happen. It will happen. Giles, thank you so much. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for everything you do. You're an inspiration to all of us, and keep doing it. You know,
I'm going to bed now. It's bedtime.
It's bedtime. It's 5 o'clock. Thank you for joining, everyone. Peace.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Giant Step podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe or follow us on Instagram at Giant Step. Music is by Sinego. Please also visit our website giantstep.net to learn more about our award-winning marketing agency.